Yes, there was slavery in Africa, but it was not like the slavery we had here in the States. Hey, welcome back to night classes. Today, topic is slavery. Hot topic. Some people don't want to bring it up. Others feel that the discussion of slavery will prevent similar atrocities from happening in the future. So, let's be very specific. Our topic for today is American slavery in comparison to others. And how is it different?
Social media is a great place to share this. Hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe. What are you waiting for?
Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, we have Middlesworth chips. Middlesworth chips taste different than any other chip I ever had. American slavery was like Middlesworth chips. The brand was distinct. Yeah, it was similar to other forms of slavery, or we could broaden it up to forced servitude. It was definitely different. Was it worse? Was it better? So we can compare it to other forms of servitude like they had in other time periods or even in other places, like Africa. Yes, there was slavery in Africa, but it was not like the slavery we had here in the States. One of the most embarrassing points of our history, but the fact that some people had the fortitude to fix it and still today are trying to fix the repercussions of this horrible time period says a lot about some of the people who lived here and still live here today. So, before we start, so let's get into it. And for all you Google scholars and Facebook philosophers out there, I'm going to be using some primary and secondary resources, and I'm going to let you know what those are. Now, before we finish our discussion, before we start our discussion, before we get deep into our discussion, we have to understand a few words here. One, chattel, slavery, dehumanization, racism. These words make American slavery very unique. We can't really talk about how unique they are until we know what they mean. So,
first, chattel. Chattel is a word that comes from the same origin as cattle. It means property, a life that is owned, property, just like a hat, just like a wallet, just like a toy. You can do what you wanted to with the thing that you own. So, some people are like, yo, slavery, isn't all slavery ownership of someone? But yeah, kind of and kind of not. Chattel slavery, connecting the two, is not just a forced servitude of someone who doesn't have the rights of citizen, but it's a, I own their life, I own their body. I just don't own their time. I just don't control, their, the way they interact in society. I control their body. I can brand it, I can rape it, I can whip it, I can kill them. I take their children are not theirs, I can sell them. Oh, we have a child. Great. Dehumanization, because the institution of American slavery, how they operated, how they worked, it conflicted with some of their value sets. They tried to completely rewrite the book and make themselves feel that it was okay because African Americans were less than human. We dehumanize people. Do we do this today? Unfortunately, sometimes we dehumanize criminals. Sometimes we dehumanize the other gender or young people. Dehumanization, looking at them as little less human than you are. We're fully human, they're less human. Because they're less human, it's okay if I abuse them in many ways. They don't deserve, or they don't need the same things that I deserve and need because they are whatever they are. Dehumanization. They even try to scientifically prove through the shape of African Americans' head or body structure, eugenics and so forth, that they were different or less than human than European people. So, other forms of slavery throughout history, some of them did have an element of racism, but some of it was just an institution where you weren't fully citizen. Were your master, you worked for me. But I still treated you like a human, and I didn't have any malice towards your skin tone or shape. American slavery was highly racist. It was black and white, native-born, brought here. But the tricky thing was, that native-born thing kind of fell apart as Africans had babies. So therefore, these people were born on American soil. What was the distinguishing characteristic? Skin tone. But wait, once Europeans started to mix with them, then the skin tone obviously got lighter. Still, the racist factor was, you are part African, I'm pure not African, so therefore I'm better than you. That's going back to the dehumanization. So racism, dehumanization, slavery, chattel, there you go.
So throughout history, especially with our modern understanding of slavery, all the words that have been translated to slavery, there's a lot of different types of slavery. But are all of those things the same thing? The understanding of slavery that we have has three main components. Usually include the following. One, forced labor. And even when we use it inappropriately, kids that sign up for a team and then after a hard practice they have to go to a fundraiser. Oh, coach, this is slavery. It's not, but it's forced labor. Something that they didn't want to do that they're required to do or coerced to do. Two, less than citizenship. They don't have the rights of the general population. They're not protected in the same manner. They don't have certain privileges, rights, etc. that the rest of the society has. Three, this concept of ownership, and even the concept of ownership is different. Some ownership is legitimately your body is owned, they can do whatever they want to you. Some of the ownership is really just your time is owned. They own your labor, they make choices for you. But the concept of ownership, forced labor, and not having the full rights of citizenship kind of come together and make what we understand as slavery. But many other forms of forced servitude have existed throughout history that share one, two, or maybe all three of those characteristics. What other forms of slavery, forced servitude, have we seen? So what types of slavery existed? Well, there's child labor could be considered, child soldiers and children soldiers, bondage labor. You ever been strapped to a desk while you work on your computer in your little cubicle? Probably not. Indentured servitude, forced domestic labor. Nothing wrong with a nanny or butler, but when they don't have the same freedoms that you do, that's tickling slavery. Sex trafficking and sex slavery. Not arranged marriage, forced marriage. It's two different things. Child brides, indentured servitude, debt slavery. Slavery to get out of debt. Slavery because you're in debt. Another reason why American slavery is so famous is simply because of the nature of chattel slavery and the mixture of racism and dehumanization. When you mix the greed, the racism, and the dehumanization, you have a mixture for one of history's most embarrassing time periods. But to prove my point, in the Holocaust, the Jewish people that were not executed, what did they do to them? They forced them to labor against their will. Treated them poorly. Guess what? Most people would call that slavery. So people who went to work camps and not death camps essentially were slaves. Jewish people being enslaved by German people. There was no good slavery, but there were slaveries that were better. Jing Ha, the admiral, was a Chinese slave that had a fleet of ships, all kinds of decision-making power. He just wasn't free. And they had to cut something off. We don't want to talk about that. Joseph, in the Old Testament of the Bible, was a slave, had a rough life, but through his skill and dependability and favor with the king, he becomes the right-hand man to Pharaoh, and Joseph is able to make decisions that helped his people. Even in the time of American slavery, there are certain places in the Caribbean where plantation owners or traders would create children and leave their whole fortune to their child. Ooh, I forgot. They would make mixed children with a slave and then leave their entire fortune to that mixed child. It's my child. So, after a few generations, there were certain islands in the Caribbean that had a black population that was actually not just free, but affluent. who would buy other. There were many people that dealt with and spoke out about this slavery and give testimony to how horrible American slavery was. Types of servitude that existed in Africa. But some of the leadership there didn't realize how cruel and inhumane people were treated once they left their shores. Somebody who was just a prisoner of war or somebody who was in debt to somebody is different than somebody whose body is owned and they're not looked at as a human. King Afonso is cited and quoted and known for urging other African kings to not participate because he found out that the people that were becoming slaves to these European traders were not treated as human beings. I was soon put under the deck, and there I received such a salutation in my nostrils as I never experienced in my life. So, with the loathsomeness of the stench and the crying together, I became so sick and low that I was not able to eat. But soon, to my grief, 2 of the white men offered me edibles, and upon my refusal to eat, one of them held me fast by the hands and laid me across the windlass and tied my feet, while the other flogged me severely. Alato actually also goes on to say that if it had not been for his knowledge of his own countrymen, meaning other Africans, in the Americas, he would think that his life was rough, knowing that after all of this that he experienced contemplating jumping overboard during the Middle Passage, he still thinks his life was bearable compared to those who spent their entire life in bondage and slavery in the Americas. So there you have it. There are and have been a number of slaveries and forced servitudes throughout human history. American slavery was very unique and not a very flattering way. It took a forced servitude, added racism, dehumanization, and the concept of chattel slavery. Chattel coming from the same root as cattle, meaning property. They just don't own your time or your labor. They own your body, your existence.
Social media is